This is Levitation, and it works on a very simple principle. This is a large magnet, this is a small magnet, and they repel each other. If this thing wouldn't spin, it would just flip and fall. But due to the spinning top magnet, it stays in equilibrium in very subtle one.
Andrei Geim is one of the world's leading authorities on high-power magnets. What's interesting about magnets is the way they can create levitation.
There is a strong magnetic field here, but my hand doesn't disturb this magnetic field. If I use something else like magnetic iron scalper, it will just disturb magnetic field and the Levitation will fall.
In vast laboratories in Europe, the USA and Japan, physicists are now experimenting with magnetic fields tens of thousands of times greater than that of the Earth.
All right, Tom, is it ramping up?
This equipment uses 20 megawatts, enough electricity to power a small town.
Really? Yeah, I can feel it. All right, ferromagnetism. Let's do some diamagnetism.
And all this energy goes into creating a magnetic field in an area just 2 inches across.
That's good. The magnet must be running warm. Okay, I'm going to lower the launcher now.
When subjected to magnetic forces of this scale, it's not just metals like iron which are affected. Almost any material can be magnetized.
We have liftoff.
And when magnetized, it floats.
Magnetic levitation strikes one's fancy. It's a fun thing to do, and there's a lot of surprises.
Pardon me. I think I'm just sitting back here anyway.
Georg and Janet have put a lot of effort and work into getting this organized, and we certainly appreciate that. Thank you very much. My name is John Warnhoff, for those of you that I've just met today, and for others that are old friends, of course, you know about me, and probably also about this gathering. This kind of began really informally, maybe a few years ago. And the person that's hosting this, the facility we're using, Avram King, who is a clinical psychologist and a futurist, I had occasion to meet him, and we struck up a conversation and a friendship, and it led to the use of this room for meetings last year. And out of that has come the nucleus of this group. The idea is very, very simply one of alternative concepts in an emerging new system that we're all experiencing in our lives, the reality of the millennium and the shift in consciousness. So I'm going to take a few moments here and just read a little bit that I've prepared, and then close with a few general comments. I'm sure you've all heard of the harmonic convergence and the shifting of consciousness. You know, some people call it call to attention. that have occurred over the last few years, but especially if we take a kind of a microcosmic look just at Washington in, say, the past year, and the events that have unfurled there in terms of the monumental changes. And then before that, the O.J. trial. And we're still kind of undoing those wrinkles, so to speak, to find out the long-term effects of some of these decisions that have been made with respect to our law, with respect to the foundation of our country, and with respect to our leadership in the world, and how that's reflected in some of these recent events. I think they all clearly demonstrate how rapidly we as a society are moving from what Avram King called stability to disequilibrium. Or, in my words, I would use the words from compression to a contraction. Or, excuse me, compaction. Not contraction, but compaction. And that's happening with both time and events. Not just the events alone, but with time as well. No one can any longer really deny that Homo sapiens now stands at a crossroads of decision. And, we're asking ourselves a very fundamental question as far as humanity is concerned, and that is, which way are we going to go? And who will we be in that process of that decision of which way to go? Some of the recent events have illustrated that two-thirds of America have consistently endorsed the Clinton presidency over the past year and a half, and with that endorsement have acquiesced somewhat to his code of conduct, and been permissive of it is one way to look at it, and one way to acknowledge it. We're all of us, each and every person in this room, in this society, in this world, we're dealing with core issues, the real substance of life. And today we're all faced with the reality of redefining a lot of our terms that we use. I won't get into the things that we've all read about and heard about on television recently with respect to the impeachment trial about the definition of terms. But if we take terms like ethics and integrity, what have those come to mean today in comparison, say, to 20 or 30 years ago? Accountability, another very important word. Victimization. Avram has a number of workshops, and as you noticed when you came in, you probably saw the mask picture hanging in the hallway. And of course, he's a clinical psychologist, so he deals with peeling off the layers of the onion to get to the core, what he calls the authentic person that we all are, and that we really strive and want to be. But through circumstances and some of the victimization that we allow, we don't really show. We hide, we cover. We've all heard about situational ethics. Well, it has now become a fundamental part of our society. Whether we like it or not, it's an integrated part of who we are. And, a situation now depends on a number of factors. It's not necessarily right or wrong, good or bad. And I'm not making a value judgment here, but I'm saying that we have moved into more of a situational ethics kind of a society than we would have been or would have recognized, say, 20 or 30 years ago. And, of course, those of us who are plugged into this shift in consciousness, the New Age concept, as an example, for years now we've heard that only 1/3 of humanity would shift in consciousness and be prepared to move into this new millennium. Move towards what the Mayans called the end of time, the end of our third dimensional time. And that, of course, according to the Mayan calendar, is the year 2012. So it's just my personal belief that this group, we also met, there were different people here on the 24th of January and back on December the 5th, to get a little bit Some of you have been here for each of the meetings. Of course, everybody can't make every meeting, so it's not that they're not interested anymore. It's just that we're growing in size and number. We probably have approximately about 40 people on our mailing list now who are interested in becoming a part of this group. And I believe that this group and its counterparts all around the world, around Mother Earth, Gaia, are forming so that we may meet tomorrow, today. We are in the process, I believe, of that very thing, meeting tomorrow, today. And that means that we're living in the now, because time itself is being compacted, being shortened. And we all seem to have a sense of awareness about that, perhaps even maybe some urgency. You know, we've chosen to move through this chaos, or as Avram calls it, what was the other word I used earlier? Anyway, you understand what I mean. This equilibrium. We're choosing to move through that chaos of this equilibrium by exercising our alternatives for a rebirth and the alignment of a new beginning. Because this is a new birthing process for us. And with that, I'd like to say that as a person who has been living with this vision, with this concept of alternative energies, alternative concepts for the future, and trying my own way, and the best way I know how, to implement it, to integrate it with people that I know, I feel like I've given birth to this group. You know, much like a mother would say. And I feel very bonded to the group. And likewise to each of you who are here today. And I want to take this opportunity to tell you that I appreciate the fact that some of you have committed yourselves in terms of leadership and some responsibility to help the group grow and to nurture the group. You know, that's very important. But this group, to me, this idea, this concept, these alternative concepts for the future and for our steps in the future, I want to let you know that it's become a primary focus for me and for my life. And that above all else, I would like to pledge my energy and my dedication to you, to all of you, even those that are not here, so that you know and you understand that we share this vision together, and that I'm committed to it, and that I will continue to serve in any way that I can to help you and help us as we take our steps together. So, you know, those of you who were here in January 24th meeting, I'd just like to close by saying that the same thing I said then is that, you know, today, let us begin this process. Thank you, Georg.
Well, welcome to those of you who've been here before and to those of you who are coming here for the first time today. Those of you who've come here for the first time should have received an introductory collection of papers that give you an idea of how far we started with some of the foundation building of our community. And invite you to talk to us and talk. There are 3 groups that we've formed, and there are several of us that are heading up those. There's Annie with the education group, and Beck and Aquamarine. And there's Dave Leonard here for the community building group, and there's myself for the technical group. And then, of course, everyone else here, most other people here also have participated, so you can ask any one of us. And make sure you get a phone number so that if you want to call us up and you have questions, great. You see whether this community is for you, how we may serve you, and what you wish to do for us. Think about those questions. See what the community might do for you that you could not do alone. the existing members, those who have participated, I want to say, and those who want to participate in the future meetings, of course, we're going to have, we're thinking, in addition to other get-togethers, to have one party socialization get-together, where we can get to know each other a little bit more on a personal level. And we're also looking for another meeting to further strengthen the foundation and clarity of the evolving community. So that's up. We haven't set times yet, but that's being planned. That's the basics. Oh, one more thing, if you later on during the interview that we're going to have today, if you need anything, just go and quietly see Janet in the back or Annie, and they'll help you out. So now, before going on, I'd like to take the time to recognize with John some of you for the leadership and contribution you've already made to the community. I'd like to take a moment doing that. So what we'd like to do is to have a little recognition for you. John and I got together, and so what we'd like you to do is come up front as we call you and hand you a little certificate for that. David Leonard.
David, thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate your effort.
And Dave, that's not here today.
He'll be here a little bit.
Okay. His leadership and contribution has also been wonderful. Also, Judy Rector, I think, is not here. I want to recognize her for timekeeping. Keep those. I'd love to see Annie Redoff come up and recognize her for her leadership and all the hospitality she's given us. Hold on. Where's Ron?
Ron is a big family.
Okay, well, we have something for him, so we'll give that to you. We want to recognize him for his outstanding artwork. I really mean it. But he's not here today. He would tell the whole story of the meeting in pictures. Absolutely the most beautiful thing.
He's our scribe,
So,
but he's scribing another big seminar.
I have one of these.
So I'll pass
one
it
of these.
on. Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's
I wanted to take a look at
of
it.
the last
I can
Yeah.
pass it around for that.
and then maybe we'll hold it in front of the
Thank
camera
you
for a moment.
very much.
I might mention too in Ron's absence that part of the reason he's not here today is he's been working with a group that has to do with youth and the future for the youth in the community. And yesterday, Colin Powell was a part of it. So we're very privileged to have this kind of talent and acumen in our group.
Thank you. Then Melanie Roger, for her secretarial services, been tidying up a lot of things for us. Thank you so much. Doing all that email. Then Suzanne Smith, for her hospitality, helping out in various ways.
Suzanne's a very special lady.
And Janet Wallace for her leadership and hospitality. No, one person that absolutely needs to be mentioned, and that's you, John.
I already did that, Artie.
John is the project initiator, and we want to thank him for his outstanding service to our community of friends.
Oh, yes. It's a nice plaque. Did you get a shot of that? Should I? Yeah. And I'd be happy to pass it around if you want to look at it. Thank you. How nice. A warm and caring group. It's nice to be a part of it.
I'm very glad. I need that. Now, after Suzanne Smith, here's a brief announcement, and we take a brief 5-minute break with you. That's your last chance before the interview. I want to explain the guidelines for the interview today, so please pay close attention to that. Please be promptly back in your seats by 10 a.m. sharp. This isn't going to work. So 5 minutes after Suzanne is done, if you can make it. We'd love to have you back in the seat so that we can start it. And I ask everyone to please be quiet during our interview as we're professionally recording the interview today. You also should have gotten some kind of piece of paper or a card, and you should have a pen to write the question down. So that's great. If you have questions, does everyone have a card? Something to write on. So that if you have a question, write it down, and we'll cover those at the end. And then if you have additional time, we'll take questions if you want to ask verbally and in person directly. So, just want to appreciate in advance the respectful silence during that time. And thank you very much. So with that, I'll hand over to Suzanne.
Thank you for coming and thank you for bringing good energy. And what we've done in discussing our goals, we realized that in order to accomplish our goals, that it would be helpful to have a geographical, specific location. Would you stand up, please? Thank you. Okay, in discussing our goals, we decided we really needed a physical place, a foundation that would support us in our goals. And what we did last weekend, Annie has some land up in the White Mountains, so John, Adam, and I, because of Annie's making really, really good arrangements, we had a wonderful trip to examine the land up there and talk to many people who are like-minded. We feel a slight urgency with Y2K approaching, so we thought, well, we better move quickly. We had a good trip. We saw the land, and I think it was so encouraging to meet many of the people there that think as we do, that want to maintain our integrity, become self-sufficient, and work toward the future, a future of harmony, one using free energy, good technology that is helpful to people and the environment. So we had a good trip. We learned a lot, and very encouraging, very hopeful. And we thank Annie for all the wonderful arrangements. And John surprised me. He drove us.
I must have done a pretty good job because we all got back safe and sound, right?
Okay, then
Are we ready?
Yeah.
For a break?
Yes. And then we'll come back at 10:10. Welcome again. Today we have the privilege and pleasure to talk with the gentleman, Ralph Ring, who was so kind to travel all the way from Nevada to be with us here in Phoenix today. Please give him a warm welcome. During the day, I understand he operates in a business dealing with locksmithing. However, he also does work as a research and engineering consultant, and we will get into all of that later, I'm sure. Ralph Ring happens to be part of an absolutely remarkable story involving the invention by the late Otis T. Carr of a very different type of spacecraft than the rockets we're all familiar with. Before we get into this, though, is there anything you would like to share before we get started, or talk a little about what you're currently doing?
There is something I'd like to share with everybody. Mike, have you got those, the 12th meditation?
Yes.
Can we hand them out?
Yes.
Excuse me, I meant to bring them up and I forgot. We were working out a kind of a program where we'd have a number and a book was to be given out to the lucky number. The name of the book is Going Within by Shirley MacLaine. Some of you might already be familiar with it, but it's an excellent book that covers the premise and gets back to the premise of where we kind of went astray. This 12th meditation that's being passed out was written by an anonymous person, and it formulates the premise, or the square one, as we like to put it, of a commitment to doing something, not any longer talking about it, but doing it. So if you care to read those over, I'm sorry I didn't bring enough of the large copies for everybody, but I did make some little ones. I think give you the idea.
Might I have a copy also?
Oh, yes, for that. Of course.
I didn't see this beforehand, so for those...
I'm sorry.
That's okay. For those people who are going to be listening to this on a tape at a later time, I would like to maybe go over it. Should we read it briefly? 12th meditation. Do you want to read it, or should I read it?
Please.
I turn away from the world about me to the world of consciousness that lies within. I shut out all memories of the past, create no images of the future. I concentrate on my being, on my awareness. I slide deep into the very recesses of my soul, to a place of utter repose. Here I perceive fact in the making, am conscious of the one being from which all beings spring. I know that this is immortal self, this is God, this is me. I am, I always was, I always will be. All men, all things, all space and time and life are here in the depth of my soul. Smaller than small, greater than great, meet and unite in me. That which I thought I was, ego, I never was at all. For it was a changing thing, mirroring the seasons and the tides, a thing to be born and grow and die. I am not a thing of time or circumstance. I am spirit, pure and eternal, birthless, deathless, and changeless. I am patient. For I am all time. I am wise. For I contain the knowledge of all things. I know not pain, for I see there is no beginning and no end. And who suffers pain must see beginning and end. I am rich, for there is no limit to the abundance I may create for my very self. I am successful, for I need only think to achieve. I love and am beloved, for all things are myself, and I am all things. I unite, I fuse, I become one with universal subconscious mind. The mask of vanity and ego I shall never wear again. I perceive the magnificent dweller at the center of my consciousness, and I know him to be my very self. Time and space, shadow and substance, what matter these? I am God.
I thought it would be appropriate to what I'm about to say in regards to alternative ideas. Want to begin? I don't know
Where we can start. Well, I'm still reflecting on the meditation. You know, from my background, I've always felt a certain uneasiness with saying I'm God. But in the context of this, it's clear that we're not speaking about the ego, but the larger self.
Well, we're holographically one. And some call that God. Some call it the Great Spirit. In this reference, it just happens to be the word God. It pertains to who and what we really are, or who and what we are, who and what we do and what we say. It's a realization that we're not really limited. We put others in charge of our ideas and paid them well for developing our ideas. But somewhere along the line, they forgot the spirit of the idea and just developed the mechanics of the idea. So a lot of inventions, a lot of things that are coming along the blooms now are limited by the connotations of past ideas that have been placed on it.
Do you have any advice that you would give people to shift to that kind of consciousness? Did you find that essential to the experiences of your invention and entrepreneur work?
Yeah, there's something that Mike and I stumbled onto that if you notice very carefully and very calmly and very relaxed when I am going to pronounce a word, but you're going to hear it in two different dimensions at the same time. And that word pertaining to what we are about to do this year in bringing floating homes or hovercraft or spaceships into reality deals with supervision. Now, you can either have supervision, which we all have, we can use it anytime we want, or we can have supervision. Now, that's the word. And if you play with it for a few minutes, you'll see what I'm talking about. There's a definite shift in the connotation. And it simply means that we either accept responsibility for our own actions again and take the lead in our own life, put it on the line, or we need help. And that's all there is to it. It's as simple as that. And that is why I brought this, because I thought this would put it in the framework immediately to get to the core of things. Because there isn't a lot of time to explain a lot of things. I brought some things back here on the table. Most of them speak for themselves. There are magnets, there are free energy devices, there are tuning forks. They're all little tools that present principles, basically one principle that we're primarily interested in, that's magnetism. I've worked with magnetism for over 40 years in different areas. Did you want me to give a background now?
Yeah, I thought maybe I wanted to add to this. I like the way you say it. It sounds like all that's really required is a simple shift in perspective. You know, I like to talk about switching from a can't-do spirit of despair to a can-do spirit of hopefulness and a knowingness that we can be all that we wish and more. Would you say that's accurate?
Oh, absolutely. Mike and I have taken another word apart, the word can and can't. The word is in slow motion is you slow that down from 14 frames a second, which our eyes are registering perception thing. You slow that word down to its original form, you have cannot, which means you have a not in the way of can. And when you untie that knot, everything slows again. And it's that simple. It's just replaying the old tapes, once again saying can, and replacing it with can in everything you do. You may not feel like it, you may not want to at the moment. There are times when you will. But at that precise moment, if you use the word can and leave the doors open, you haven't closed anything. You've left your creative powers open to whatever comes along.
Okay then, where shall we start, Ralph? I thought maybe can you tell us a little bit about who Otis T. Carr is and how you got to meet him?
After I got out of the Army, I was in Korea, and I came back in the 50s and got discharged. I started an underwater business, a diving business. First it was a hard hat business, because I was familiar with that, and then I went to scuba gear. And I wound up working down in Southern California, Newport Beach, that's where we live. And I worked for, among other people, Jacques Cousteau with the Aqualung. He had a base there in Costa Mesa. And I was a research and development diver. And I was raising a family. I had 2 children. We bought our own home. And my work would take me out to Catalina Island and beyond, testing diving equipment. One of the primary things I worked on was a wraparound mask, so we'd have more view, more vision underwater. But this work was very stressful on my wife and my family, because it would take me away for anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks. And it was a dangerous job. We've had a few accidents, and my wife just told me one day that I've got children and that she'd like me home with the children, and that would I please find another profession. Well, I was in a heavy weapons battalion in the Army, and they taught me how to use a machine gun and a heavy mortar and a 1.5 howitzer, big artillery gun. So when I kept putting in for engineering school, it was always put back in the infantry. I didn't have the initiative then to, if I wanted. So anyway, to make a long story short, I have always been a tinkerer, or a garage mechanic, if you will. And I've always come up with different ideas and made them work. And my wife pointed out that there was an ad in the paper. It was for a company called Advanced Kinetics. It was in Costa Mesa, California. The head of the institute was Dr. Weinhardt, a German scientist, physicist. And they needed help. They just had to add a lab tech wanted, apply, or whatever. And she said, well, why don't you go down there and see what you can do? Well, I went down, and I didn't have the formal education to, I had high school and so forth, but I didn't really, in my mind at that moment, qualify for this kind of work. But then I remembered back when I was in high school, there was a physics teacher explaining that a bumblebee could not aerodynamically fly. And I was kind of naive and very, very rowdy in those days, and I was really, I felt I was being denied some kind of truth here, because I was looking out the window and I saw a bumblebee hovering. It was on the 2nd floor. And Santa Cruz High School in Santa Cruz, California. And when this bumblebee was hovering, I noticed that the frequencies were all under control. He could do anything he wanted to do in any direction he wanted to go. And I was kind of young and naive, and I know now a lot more than I did then, but at the time I decided to go listen to the bumblebees and not my physics teacher. Because I didn't know that both of us were observing things from a different frame of reference. And that's what I've since learned, that there are frames of reference, there are contexts, places for everything, and everything has a place. Well, anyway, I got that information, and I studied everything I could on magnetics. So when I walked into this institute, it was noontime, everybody was on a lunch break, and I walked down the hall looking for a secretary so I could put in an application. And there was nobody around. I walked by Dr. Weinhardt's office, he saw me, he said, "What are you doing out there? Come in," and we talked. And I told him that I learned things from bumblebees, that, that I found that they do different things. And he says, "You're my kind of guy. You go to work tomorrow." And the job I had...
Were you surprised?
Yes, I was. Very surprised. And to this day, no credentials. I didn't have to submit any credentials other than the ordinary thing. But the job that they gave me, this was a governmental research institute that was funded to develop new and different ideas, different technologies. And because of my familiarity with magnetism, I was given this project that, for the sake of explanation, was just a giant magnet, electromagnet, and a camera, which was a Polaroid high-speed camera with an oscilloscope attached. And we had a cathode ray tube, which is nothing more than a television tube firing electrons just like it does on your screen. But they wanted me to shoot this electron through this magnetic field from point A to point B, get it through this magnetic field without deflection. And every time we fired it, it would go either negative or positive. And it didn't matter the amount of energy we had. He said, "We've got Boulder Dam behind us, just keep going till you get this thing through there," because at that time they were contemplating the rivers of space, of magnetic space, to get to the moon, and they thought that they had to have this formation. Well, I stayed on the project several months, and I took thousands of photographs of the electrons being fired through the field, which none of them would get through the field successfully. They'd either go to the negative side or the positive side. The bench next to me was working on levitation, and what that consisted of was a giant coil, if you will, iron wire wrapped around the coil, iron core. And they take a steel ball and they put it on top and fire some power to this coil, which would levitate the steel ball for 8 minutes. And then it would burn up these were called gigatrons. It would burn up the coil. And at that time, and this was in 1950, in the 50s, they were going for like $400 a piece for these coils. So every time they burnt one up, they'd have to go and check another one out. And I saw this enormous expense going on. My project was marked up. I mean, all I was doing was taking pictures, really, and firing this thing. And it was classified like $10,000, $20,000 a day that they would get funded for. So I went home, and I'm always been a garage sailor, so I picked up some things from a garage sale, and one of them was an audio amplifier and some speakers that I took apart. And the one project that I wanted to prove to myself was easier than what I was doing, was to get this electron through the field. So I took a television apart and I got the cathode rays and the magnets all together, and I had an idea from studying nature that she never forces anything. It's always meandering. It's always ebbing and flowing. There's always two paces to everything that nature does. So I thought, why not pulse this signal and spin it through this magnetic field and see what happens. The first time I did it, it worked. And then from then on, it worked.
Well, how did you get it to spin?
Well, when you pulse it at a certain frequency that starts its own gyration. And then as it goes through the magnetic field, it is in its own time frame. So it pulses itself.
How was the electron shot through? What was the device that generates
television cathode ray tube.
Cathode ray tube.
Right.
And you simply pulsed it at a certain frequency.
Instead of turning it on and shooting it, I pulsed it with a switch, and it would start the rotation through the field.
Is it a very high frequency, or
very high
frequency? How did you find that? Did you just know that frequency that you might try? Or?
No, I didn't know.
So you just stepped up through until you saw it hit on the other side.
Right. It was a Radio Shack experiment, and I didn't expect to be successful that early in the experiment, but I was, and I wrote it up, and I took Polaroid pictures of it, and I went into Dr. Weinhardt, along with another experiment that I completed then, which was this speaker, 15-inch woofer speaker. I put it on the floor of my living room, and hooked up what's the equivalent to an audio amplifier. It's just sound waves that you can fluctuate between 16,000 cycles, etc. And what I did was I put different things in the center of this cone, and they seemed to flutter quite a bit. And I finally wound up with a ping pong ball, levitating. And I went to bed that night, and when I woke up in the morning, it was still levitating. No sound. It was just sitting there.
For that, did you use a sine wave, or?
Well, it was an audio amplifier. I don't remember even basically what range it was, but as I kept fine-tuning it, about 23 or 24,000 cycles.
You used a simple sine wave generator, or how was the sound generated back in those days?
Well, like an oscilloscope, that is how it was generated.
Yeah, I'm not so technically well versed. I'm
Well,
intrigued by this, so I wonder what frequency you used to make this thing go. I would love to do that sometime.
Okay, well, it can be duplicated just practically any time. You get the right set of circumstances. Anyway, I took these into Dr. Weinhardt. I took both experiments and wrote them up, took them into Dr. Weinhardt, and he said, close the door, and he said, sit down, I want to talk to you. And I was just a young man out of the service, and I was still pretty naive about the way systems work. And he told me that we were a government-funded system, that he knew it was that simple. But unfortunately, we were getting paid to almost not find the answer. And he said that's where the revenue goes, to pay our salaries, etc. He said, you can't do this yet.
Pay to fail.
Huh?
Pay to fail.
Is that our tax money at work?
Yeah. Yeah, well. So anyway, I became really shocked at first, because I had always felt as a kid growing up, I'll get my 15 minutes of fame somewhere. I mean, I wanted to do something constructive. And since it bordered around magnetism, I thought, well, this is it. I found something we can begin with here. It's simple. It costs $50 compared to, I think my experiment, the equipment that I used was in excess of $100,000. Oh, easy, probably. And in those days, that was a lot of money. But I did the same thing for probably $50. So I know the principle's valid. So he said no, and he had to shred up my pictures and my write-ups, and he said, go back to work. He says, maybe someday, but not today. And I went back to work.
They'll take it from you anyway.
Huh?
They will take it away from you anyway.
No. I had some visitors after the, I don't know what happened, but I had some visitors that were very interested in my experiments come by. And they got rather pushy. My wife had to ask them to leave the house. They were very upsetting to the children, myself, and my wife. And they just not talk about what we were doing. Anyway, I lasted another couple of months, and I was very discouraged. I was going to sleep on the job. I was just bored to tears almost. And I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. And I had a limited, at that time, I was going to night school. I was going to college at night, taking different courses. I was taking oceanography and marine biology. I thought that's what I wanted to do. I ran into some people, and I started talking about the reasons I left my job. And they said, well, you need to come to our group. It's called Understanding. The name of the group is Understanding. It was created by Daniel Fry in California way back in the early 50s. And because these people love to hear stuff like this. We talk about this all the time. I said, well, great, I'll have some place to talk. So I did get involved with the group, and it was wonderful because I found that I could talk about these things without a threat or the ridicule, if you're being ridiculed or anything like that. And they were working at that time with a project. How long was this? Oh, well, they were all over Southern California. I believe they had different pods, different groups. But in our immediate
That group have a name?
Understanding.
Understanding.
That was the name of the group. Understanding. They had about 30, maybe more. I'd say about 30 people in Costa Mesa, Newport area. So they were working with, and I'd done a lot of Tesla technology and a lot of research with Tesla. And they said, oh, Tesla, well, we're working with TAR over here in Oklahoma City. He's running into trouble because of his experiment that he wanted to demonstrate to the people was becoming very difficult to do for one reason or another. He just couldn't get it stabilized enough to share with people. Something happened. He had at one time that on the table there were some what's called accumulators. They're little double tetrahedrons. And at one time, we were putting mercury in the center of these. And the day of the demonstration, the mercury, the night before, the mercury leaked out of the pod and didn't go on the demonstration. Anyway, they said he's in trouble. They're accusing him of taking funds and not producing, et cetera, et cetera. He's coming out here to the West Coast. He's coming to our facility. And we'd like you to meet him. So he did, and I did, and he brought his entourage with him. There was about 6 other people in the party. And we brainstormed for hours. It was very quick to get into the higher levels of communication with them because they were very natural, simple people, but very, very intelligent. They were using their intelligence. So I gave him some of my ideas. They gave me some of theirs, and we found out they were the same ideas. Why not get together and do something?
you all sit at a table to do this brainstorming? Was that this Otis?
Yeah. They were, the group at that time was fearful of whatever, people wanting to stop these ideas, wanting to stop cars. They had an idea that if they stopped in, they'd stop progress. So one of the people, a Dorothy Sawyer, owned a cabin up at Lake Arrowhead. That's in California, by Big Bear. And she said, why don't you guys go on up to the cabin until we decide what we can do and how we can go about doing this. So 6 or 8 of us, I forget exactly how many, we went up to the cabin, and this is where we really got into our conversation. And we were building with our minds different ideas of transportation and habitation and just discussing these things. Well, before we knew it, they had got us a plant, a small research laboratory and plant down in Hesperia, Apple Valley, California, just down over the hill. And they said, well, you guys can go down there and work, and we'll make sure that you get everything you need to do your work.
So did Otis move down there then?
We moved down to Apple Valley. And we then commenced doing what we've been talking about. We were experimenting with different forms of levitation, different magnetic fields, and how to understand and control the effects. And so that's how I became acquainted with Farr. And in meeting him, he had been a protege for 3 years with Nikola Tesla. That was in the Baltimore, New York area, or whatever. Otis met him. He was an elevator operator in Baltimore. And he used to take Tesla up and down the elevator. And Carr was a very simple man, but a genius. I would take him anytime, anywhere, and we could always figure our way out of any situation. He's just that kind of a person. So in talking to Tesla, they became friends, and Tesla said, come on, I'll take you as a protege. I've been trying to get these ideas across. I've gone to J.P. Morgan. Now, this is what I got from Carr. Tesla had developed 2 different forms of energy. It was a crossroads. And he presented it at that time to J.P. Morgan, who was the money person at that time, who was backing Westinghouse and Edison Company. And Tesla was working with these companies. So he took these results into J.P. Morgan, and he looked at them and said, well, what have you got here, Tesla? You've got this over here in Colorado Springs, no wires, no telephone poles, and you've got this over here where we can put people to work with copper mines and cut down all the trees and make telephone poles. Let's go this way. There's more money to be made. And this was a very critical decision because we had a chance to go with free energy at that moment. And it was a choice we made to go in the idea that we keep everybody working in the opposite direction. So he told Carr, he says, we'll probably never get it off the ground in my time, so you're charged with it in your time, and you pass it on in your time. So Carr took me on as a protege, and we worked together. And we were successful in all our attempts and all our endeavors concerning alternative ideas and energies. And,
well, you know how that came about, how he decided upon you, to choose you for this task?
well, it wasn't just me. There was others as well, but he took me as we were good friends. You know, everybody'd go to bed and we'd still be up for days.
Oh, I see.
So it was just a natural thing. It wasn't, certainly wasn't because of my
It
credentials.
was not a formally chosen thing, it just naturally fell into place.
Just naturally fell into place. In fact, everything we did was quite natural and quite simple. And that's one of the things I wanted to express in this 12th meditation, that keeping it simple, like the old saying just keep it simple, stupid, or whatever it is a very viable.
Or keep it simply sweet.
Sweet?
Or keep it sweet and simple.
That's a good one. So not sweet. So we developed as long and as far as we could. We had rented this, some suites in Los Angeles at the big hotel, Sheraton or the Hilton or something, and we had a big banquet hall. We were going to demonstrate some small little models of the hovercraft. We had a toy manufacturing company build small models that we were incorporating the simplicity of levitation in the model. Once they built them and they studied them and they understand themselves enough, they could move forward with the ideas. And about a week before the showings, we were visited by some authorities that said we were in violation of everything.
Now, before that happened, did you get any of these devices to function already?
Oh, yeah.
Now, I'm really curious about that. Would
I
you
know
share a little
you
bit about how this works and how this was made?
Well, it's not complicated. I found out from the Bumblebee, a good friend of mine who's not with us anymore is Arthur Aho and his brother Wayne Aho, which will be at that convention in Laughlin, wrote a book, Tomorrow's Energy May Not Be Fuel. And in the book, he describes a small cavity next to the larynx in levitating creatures, or some birds levitate, that is what he called a resonator cavity. Resonation. It amplified whatever beat or rhythm or vibration from the beating of the wings that would go into this cavity, would amplify it to reach the surrounding vibratory rate of, let's call it the Earth, say 8-point-something cycles per second, and became a free and independent agent above the gravitational field. It created its own magnetic field. And when I discovered this, I realized that going back to Tesla and the Tesla coil, this is what it simplistically is. It is a resonator. It resonates energy. It's something like in some of your chanting and some of your, there's ohms or ahs or hues. They all have a very definite vibratory rate.
And can you hold the thought for just one moment?
Sure.
I'm going to change this around. That's why I put the clicking for.
I'm sorry if I don't talk more explicit. This has been 50 years ago, and I'm trying to recall a lot of the things that I'm sure you want to hear about. So I'm having to dig back in some of the old files.
All right. So you were speaking of the resonance. Thank you.
Well, when I was in the military, and before I got put back in the infantry one time, I did have an introduction to the engineering school, and thought I was on my way. But in that introduction, I learned one thing that was worth the entire experience, and that was a form of resonance. This was at Fort Ord, California, and we had little bridges that, like a golf course that you walk over, etc., to go jumping and running assignment. We'd go to either the gun firing range or we'd go somewhere, and we'd, in cadence, double time. And in crossing these bridges, they were collapsing. They were falling apart eventually. Like a few weeks of these guys going back and forth, they'd have to rebuild the bridges. And they found that, like the Tacoma's Narrows Bridge, I don't know whether you're familiar with that, the wind caught it and it went into a resonance. And it couldn't stop, it just kept going. And that would have continued had it not broken forever. That resonance builds tremendous energy.
Is it sort of like a swing? The swing, and when you swing back, you give it a little bit more push, it goes further, and then it swings back, you give it a little bit more push, and it keeps adding until it has natural resonance. It keeps swinging greater, more forcefully.
It has a lot to do with inertia and overcoming inertia with balance. You can't overcome inertia with force. There's no way that you're going to force Mother Nature to do anything that she doesn't want you to do using force. But if you understand the laws that govern certain things, it's very easy. She's welcoming, I can't say welcoming anymore. Welcoming, still can't say it.
Welcoming.
She's inviting us.
Inviting us.
To use the simplicity that's all around us. We live in a sea of energy. There's enough, that motion I just made with my hand is enough to run New York City for a week. I just moved enough energy to do that. That's how much energy there is.
So you're saying that this principle of resonance is also involved in levitating an object?
Oh, yeah. See, there was a fellow by the name of Heisenberg. He was a scientist. And with the development of the electron microscope, he discovered what is later to become embellished as the quantum ideas of things, which simply means, looking through the microscope, he realized the energy it took to look through the microscope also changed the thing you were seeing. So there was no absolutes, eliminated absolutes. We are a part of our environment. We are a part of everything we do, whether we realize it or not. But he did prove that this is so. And it's called the, what is that principle, Mike? Heisenberg principle. Uncertainty. Uncertainty. Are you certain about that? Anyway, and then in quantum physics, 1 and 1 no longer equal 2. It equals 3 or more, 4, whatever. And the idea was you take one thing here and one thing here and you produce a third thing. Take a sound wave and put it in a cavity and it's bouncing back and forth. When it comes out the end of the cavity, it's completely different. It's a new creation just from the resonation. And it's very, very powerful. When I was in Northern California, I've always been a alternative energy person, and the places that I've had have all run on alternative ideas. One of them in Northern California was I was near a little stream. It was just a trickle coming down. And I said, I'm going to use this for electricity in our house. This is remotely away from the coal line. We had to produce our own electricity. So I thought, well, I'll get a paddle wheel and I'll turn this water and turn a generator and produce electricity. And I did. And the bulbs would light up, but they were dim. And I said, gee, there's some way to amplify this. And then I went back to Tesla technology of amplification and resonance. And I found by taking the tube that I had, a pipe actually, that I had to run the water through, and rifling it like the riflings in a rifle, I could spiral the glass, the water, the same way I did with the electron. Same idea. And it was super speed. I couldn't even put my hand in front of it. It pushed my hand away. So I took this little trickle of water and amplified it to where I could do anything with it. While I was turning this little paddle wheel, and I lit up the whole mountain. I was putting light bulbs everywhere. In fact, I controlled things by unscrewing light bulbs. I didn't know how to control it.
So you're saying that the pressure at the exit was greater than the pressure put in at the entrance?
Tremendous, tremendous pressure. So anyway,
where did you take this? Where did that energy come from? It's so difficult for me to conceptualize. Is there a way that you
the
just...
second law of thermodynamics you're referring to. Well, where there's balance, when you have a balanced situation, you have reduced the friction to practically nothing. I don't know whether you've heard of the Coral Castle in Florida. The gentleman there tried to give information to the world, and they said, no, go, and he did. So he did it on his own. But he understood the importance of balance in nature. If you're on balance, if you're on cue with nature, you can do anything. There is so much power, enormous power available.
So all of nature is backing you?
Huh?
All of nature is backing you up?
All of it. It's all nature. It's just, we've gotten used to using things not to their completion, but halfway. And then we abandon that idea and start another one, and it goes halfway. You know, like the automobile.
So on a personal level, I know this is going with the flow and not being so straight-laced.
Helps a lot.
To move more in
Yes,
curves.
it does. It breaks the ice.
This applies in the scientific realm of creating energy for electricity, too.
It's the same principle. There's only one principle involved. And how we were successful with the little toys that we had and the little spaceships that we had, and later on the larger ships that we had, was because we stuck with the simplicity of it. We were blown away daily by what we were discovering with an open mind. We had nothing, we had no restrictions, no barriers, no labels on anything. And we were being introduced to phenomena after phenomena. It was just incredible. And so when they came and said that we were, they gave us a citation or something similar to a citation that we were attempting to overthrow the monetary system of the United States. We would have to cease our activities because we were openly demonstrating these things around the people around the area that knew us. Sometimes there'd be a corona around the periphery of the ship, and coming back through the atmosphere, there'd be a corona, and this would give off a very brilliant light, and we were, lights in those days were considered, everything was considered UFOs. So we were, then they watched us like with magnifying glasses, and they came in and told us that we'd have to quit our operations, that we weren't licensed, we weren't this, we weren't that. So Carr said, well, I guess it's over for now. Just keep the idea going, keep it alive. So in those days we had, there's some pictures back there of the craft, and there's some internal drawings of the craft. We had two moving parts. We had a wheel spinning clockwise and a wheel spinning counterclockwise, basically. It's now termed as vortex mechanics. It's understanding vortexes and what they are and how they operate, et cetera, et cetera. But we had a wheel within a wheel spinning in opposite direction. Instantly nullified the gravitational field when we amplified or resonated these frequencies.
So there was some initial electrical impulse involved, which you generate an initial electrical current that from the spinning of this.
The initial pony motor, as we called it in those days, that would start the spin was just a tap of like a battery. And once we got the tap, and it started and it got itself balanced, and then there was...
So the motor would start the rotation of this wheel. It wouldn't
The
send
battery, the
it wouldn't-
electricity.
Well, the electricity would start it, so it would actually be introduced into the wheel in some form. Was it like a Tesla coil?
Oh, yeah. It was a like a flywheel in the center. There's pictures of it back there. And it had these 12 little accumulators set at right angles to a magnetic, horseshoe magnet, and these were set in the center. You'll see it in the picture. And every time it went by, it would pick up and cancel. It would pick up here and cancel here. It was what's come to be known as tachyon energy. It propagates. It keeps moving. It's not like kinetic energy. It's perpetual, if you will, of its own. Energy is going on all the time. It never stops. We stop looking at it sometimes in different perspectives, but it doesn't stop.
Is it, in that sense, newly created energy, or is it something that's taken from somewhere?
Newly created energy?
Well, I'm attempting to see if it's free, or if it is or newly in the sense that perhaps it's
the label
it's like a birthing, like a new child, or is it that it's a composite of an energy taken from another locale or another space?
No, it's the same energy that we're breathing right now. Hey, Mike, did you bring me the double ring magnets, those blue ones?
Yeah.
One picture is worth 10,000 words. I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Some of these ideas I've played with, but I'm attempting to imagine what it would be like to think of this the very first time. And I know I have previously thought, how can this be? And can only understand it in metaphysical terms, not in terms of physics.
Well, physics plays a very important role. It just didn't go far enough, like the bumblebee. Now I hardly respect my physics teacher because he was absolutely right. Aerodynamically, the bumblebees don't fly. They levitate in one different direction. Anyway, this is just an old broom handle and a couple of magnets. And I understand we've got a small video that we could view today on a guy in Canada that's developed beyond this, what I'm going to show you here. But basically, this is all there is to it.
May I describe it briefly for those listening on it? So what I see is you have like a shortened broomstick, and you have a handle, and you have two ring magnets, and you have stacked them on this pole. And one of the magnets is up in the air from the opposing field, opposing magnetic field. If you turn it over, they'll of course attract. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, anyway, in a picture, that's all there is to it. It's as simple as that. There's nothing else, and it's all around us. It's in everything. It's in our food. It's everywhere. Can I set this in?
Oh, great. Thank you.
I've got a set of magnets here. If you're wondering, wow, the magnets aren't very strong, or they can't do very much. I'm going to pass this around. These are a series of magnets. So all they are magnets. And I'm going to ask you to just pull them apart if you can. You can twist them, and they'll come apart. But I want you to get familiar, and be careful, because they'll give you a blood blister if you're not. I just want you to feel how much pressure it is to pull those things apart. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was gyro-rotation, or gyroscopic, akin to and in sequence with vortex mechanics is gyroscopes, the gyroscopic, the understanding of what a gyroscope does. For one reason or another, there's different books written on why the Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees. Volansky, a Russian author, wrote a book called Worlds in Collision. If you want to read a book on why the Earth was tilted, that's a good one. Anyway, for one reason or another, science has come to the idea now that something hit our planet. and it pushed what's now our moon out into space, and it's become our satellite. Well, it's a counterbalance keeping us in orbit, and I'm not a scientist in that field. I'm not, my terminology and everything might be real crude, but the premise, the idea is that we've tilted 23.5 degrees. Now, to have a planet that is fruitful and abundant with everything, a degree of about 8 degrees is perfect. You can have year-round, you don't have the hot and the cold, you don't have the poles like they are. The old Earth itself used to be called, it's a German word, Walmwallen or something. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it was at that time it just had a girdle around the center of Earth, and the polar regions weren't ice, water.
A warm hall.
Warm home. Well, anyway, getting back to the rotation, Mike is my good friend and companion, and he's my strength. When I can't get an idea, he prods me one way or another. He'll prod me to get my motors running again. And so we play these little games with words, which I've explained a little earlier, and with toys. And they give us more ideas and more ideas. And the game that we play with the Earth's tilt is that we are trying to live an upright life, producing upright situations in what we thought was an upright world. But it's really tilted. And unless you take this into your calculations when you're figuring something, you'll always come back to zero. It won't quite work. When scientists, now more than ever, they're taking into consideration the tilt of the Earth, but at one time they weren't considering this at all. So everything was a mystery. Standing an egg on its end on the solstice or the equinox was a phenomena they couldn't explain. So, and then they began to realize that there is something more to the tilt of the Earth than we once thought. What it is throwing everything in the magnetic field just slightly off. So it's extremely difficult for upstanding situations to exist without conflict, unless you understand that there's a tilt there for a purpose or a reason. And when I was working with Carr, he would explain to us that the opposition, like the sand in an oyster shell, was necessary to create a pearl. That's the way he put it, that's the way he talked. Because you have to have a little agitation. You have to have that. It's important not to do away with the negative. The negative is good. It's just as good as the positive. And when I first heard this, I didn't think he knew what he was talking about, but when I realized what he was saying, that if my mother hadn't pushed me away from the stove when I was about to put my hand on it, I would have had maybe a deformed hand, because I was anxiously trying to get into the fire and things like this. In other words, in retrospect, everything that's happened to us is good. There hasn't been a bad thing ever happened to us, if we really want to be honest with ourselves. It's all strengthened us in one way or another. So, anyway, the way Mike and I play with toys and tops and so forth, we were tying together an idea to tell you folks about today, and I forgot what the idea was, but I've got the premise. Our system, our society, our world has slowed down because of the tilt of the Earth. It is wobbling. It's roughly 1,000 miles at the equator. But we're spinning right now at about 700 miles an hour right now as we're sitting here. All of us are spinning. We're in motion. And energy is creating energy. So you don't need a lot of facilities, power companies and everything that have built up. We have needed them in the past because we needed the power and we didn't know any different. But with the advent of solar alone, they have a plane in Hawaii right now. It's called the Pathfinder Plus. That has been up for 3 or 4 or 5 months now with no conventional power, no gasoline. It's just run on solar panels. And it's the equivalent of 5 hair dryers, the energy. Just a big floating wing. But it is a live demonstration for those who have vision to see it of free energy. That is the Wright brothers of the 21st century in progress. They are on their way. Once they incorporate this into a larger picture, and Mike and I were just down in Barstow where they have advanced solar from Solar 1 to now Solar 2, which is a totally different resonator for energy. In Solar 1, you have the solar panels photovoltaically collecting energy and producing electricity. In Solar 2 in Barstow, and anybody can go there, the plant's there. I don't think they let you on the plant, but you can see it. There's a big fence around it. They have just an array of mirrors, circle, in a circle, around a pillar in the center. And on top of the pillar, they have a block of salt. It's a little more elaborate than that, but that's basically all they have. A block of salt and mirrors. They can generate, what is that, Mike?
10,000 kilowatts of power.
Huh?
10,000 kilowatts of power. That's enough to light up Chicago for 3 days.
And all it is this mirror reflecting the sun's rays onto this block of salt, melting the salt. They know the temperature of the salt will melt, etc. This produces a tremendous amount of pressure. This produces steam and runs through a turbine, produces electricity. And this one little array, which isn't any larger than this parking lot, can take care of 10,000 homes forever with no moving parts, just from the sun. That's Solar 2. They're working on Solar 3 now, and that's going to be really phenomenal, because Solar 3 incorporates, I became familiar with it in 1980, when I built this underground house you'll see in the pictures in there in Prescott, Arizona, with a fellow down here in Phoenix called Storm. His name is Stephen Storm, and his father, I don't know his first name, but his father and a Chinese scientist discovered that you could create a panel that would operate off the infrared band. There's all kinds of waves running around us right now. Solar radiation is just a very limited range. Well, they developed these panels and found they no longer need batteries because infrared is 24 hours a day. So you don't need any batteries. Well, they were going to develop this, and they ran into some very serious difficulty here in the Phoenix area. And I understand they took the idea back to China. The scientists took the idea back to China. So we don't have it anymore. I don't know what's going on with it. I haven't heard anything.
In the interest of the time we have, that's great. Now, I was thinking this is going, you said the Solar 3 is going to be this great thing, and I'm going, well, if I can much more simply build a device that resonates and allows me to levitate and create such an effect that at one point it creates a big flash. I imagine there's quite a bit of energy involved in the corona you talked about. So I'm going, well, why not go with that? So, well, getting back to the Otis car story, you were being shut down. What happened then?
Okay. one other thing before we get there.
Okay.
If I can finish, just round this up. I'm sorry if I get carried away into other areas. I just want to reach all of you with the ideas that I'm trying to get across. This is a little top. You can get them anywhere. And I don't know if
Use
this
the
is
surface right here. Maybe we can use that.
And now, with the tilt of the earth, I'm just going to use an analogy, and I've never used it before, so I'm kind of digging from scratch. With the tilt of the earth, you have a situation hypothetically similar to this. This is a very low rate. It's tilted. So all our energy field, our magnetic fields and everything are adequate, but very sometimes erratic. But when you can balance this up, when you bring it back into full balance, and this goes for an individual as well, when you bring yourself into full balance, you actually resonate at a higher rate of speed. Your vibratory rate and everything increases. You know, when you get up in the morning and you sing a song, or you know, on camp trips when we used to go camping, we'd sing in the band, and we'd get, boy, our spirits would be way up there, opposed to sitting there and just doing nothing. There'd be a tremendous shift in energy. Well,
so for those who couldn't see it, if you spin it fast, it is very stable, or a different type of
angling.
Yeah, as of the gyroscope, rather than when you spin it slowly at an angle.
If it's too slow, you can always tilt the gyroscope if it's slow. But once it reaches its ratio pattern, you can't tilt it over. It will not go. There's no way you can tilt it over. And in reference to what I was talking about, in reference to the 12th meditation, if we can get rid of the old tapes, back there, on the top of the craft would be a garden that would be completely self-contained. And we've done this in Prescott, where we built our underground house, and we found that everything can be brought into balance where it will take care of itself. There's no need to take care of anything. It's all being taken care of for us. It's when we get in the way with what's called ego that it shorts us to ground. It shorts us out. Pulls us back down to the third dimension. And we're really multi-dimensional.
I dreamed of putting a biosphere on the top of it. Have it be a whole
Absolutely. You could live in your garden. You know, you could have your meals in your garden, you can sleep in your garden, or you can go downstairs. Or be a new garden of Eden.
It's a hover salad.
Huh?
The garden on top of the craft is a hover salad.
Well, anyway, I'm sorry if I took too much time.
Well, briefly, just briefly.
What happened
to your oldest?
Okay.
Car?
They interrogated all of us, and they because of lack of intelligence in those days, they were very brutal in their interrogations. They were very ignorant the way they interrogated us. And you can't get blood out of a turnip. I mean, they took our spacecraft. One of them is, to this day, I'm sure it's still there, at Los Alamos, underground. It's about 90 feet underground. And they tried to mount weapons on it. In the technology we were working with, weapons are obsolete. There is no need for weapons. There is no way they can operate in the field that we were working in. But they tried, and as soon as they tried to fire through this magnetic field, which is basically the craft, they would explode on it. They would blow up on themselves. So they found they had to obsolete Carr's idea for any chance of being a war machine. That's the one thing I like about Carr's machine, because it's beyond weapons.
There is an interesting aspect to all of this that I've heard that you haven't mentioned, and that is the travel of a craft that I think you were in.
Oh, okay.
So, all right, tell us how that was and what it was like to make this trip.
Well, again, it's very simple, and our craft was
was, I mean, I should say there were not only the prototypes that were smaller, there was actually the full.
Now the prototype.
How big was the large?
Well, we had various sizes from we had 12-inch, we had 6-foot model, we had 30-foot model, and we had a 45-foot model, large model. But the smaller versions were primarily designed to introduce the principles to children. That's why we built them into craft and so forth. We went on, Carr was, the interrogations were very intimidating. They said if we talked about this or did any, the same thing I got from Dr. Weinhardt. If we did anything out of the ordinary, we would be arrested and confined in Devil's Island, something like that. So it upset Carr quite a bit, and he was aging by then, and he had a lot of pressure on him, and he had to go into the hospital, and he had some complications. But we disbanded, we dispersed, and we went all over the place. Wayne Aho is in up by Reno in Garberville, California. Myself, I'm here. There are other members that were with us that are all over the nation in different places. But I teamed up with a fellow by the name of,
Quite upsetting to me sometimes to hear how good men have wonderful intentions and follow through and down to such a fate. And I'm using now, as I think of the explanation about the earth, being upstanding, and how it's difficult to be an upstanding citizen as related to us all being a bit askew. So that's what I should say.
Well, in the face of adversity, unless you have balance, along with other studies that we've gone into, is some into Chi, some into Tai Chi, some into martial arts. They're all basically the same thing, and it's balance. Knowing who and what you are, and you don't have to worry about the rest of the world, because it takes care of itself. Everything takes care of itself. Just be what you want to be, only develop it to its fullest potential, instead of saying can't, or won't, or don't, or whatever. Just eliminate the words from your vocabulary, like body, for instance. Our science has come to the point now where it will, and you can look in any encyclopedia, explain what a body is. We don't have a body. It is energy. Under an electron microscope, you can't see anything but energy. We are a composite of a mental image programmed to fluctuate at so many cycles per second so that our retina can pick up the vibratory rates of everything going on. But there are other cycles going on. There's 15, 16, 17 cycles. And as persons develop their intuition, or they go into themselves, they develop this incredible ability to see these higher frequencies. And they're all within ourselves.
Oh, well, you've got me sitting on the edge of the seat. I want to know about, I'd love to live in the chronology. Before they shut you down, you actually had this large craft.
We had a 45-foot
craft.
And I was fortunate enough to be one of the 3 people, there was 3 of us, that went into the craft, and we were sitting around basically like this, around in the center of the craft. Now, this is from memory, and I'm not clear on everything, and I wasn't the technician to put all this stuff together. I was a kind of a general protege and a gopher at the same time. I did a lot of errands, I did a lot of other things for the project. But what we had basically was just a ball, crystal ball, in the center, and underneath what would be best described as a laser, fluctuating variable laser. Underneath.
Now, when you're saying the center, it was not in the center of the craft.
Yes,
so right in the
center of the craft.
And I see.
Right in the center of the craft. And there was a
if you've ever seen a compass on shipboard, if you've ever been on a ship and you've seen a compass, there's a ring around the compass. Well, this was set like that. It was set like a gyroscope. And this ball was in the center. And it had a laser, or what we call a laser, which is extremely high-frequency light coming up from the bottom. And what this did, and the technique that did it, I'm not quite sure of, but it dispersed the light out into multiple rainbows, not just 7 colors, but infinite amount of colors. And from like 0 to 360 degrees, you had 360 colors or more. You could even dissect that down. It was all run on color.
So like one infinitely variable rainbow that went 360 degrees around?
Correct. Yeah, all the way around. And it had full spectrum. It was beautiful. It was beautiful like a rainbow. But the way it was navigated was through, and this is the best way I can explain it this time, downrange, just before you go up the hill to Lake Arrowhead, we had a range of about 65 miles. This was in the Victorville Valley down in southern California. We had a 65-mile range. But down in the valley where Carr wanted us to go, was a remote area. I'm not sure how many miles, maybe 20 miles down range or something. It vibrated at a color frequency, or what you would call a color. Everything can vibrate at colors, or vice versa. And Carr would say, okay, this is aquamarine, and we're going to go here, lock on, and it would lock on.
Would he tell you that before you were in the craft?
We were on board the craft. We were in communication with Carr on the craft.
How?
Ham radio.
Ham radio,
I don't remember.
But this corona or this does not interfere?
No, that wouldn't. The corona on the outside of the ship happened when we came back, or when we were experimenting on it.
Oh, so this sort of like within the pre-transport state? That was in the pre-transport stage, you would communicate and focus on this light?
Yeah. And it was, and I can't remember all the details, but it was basically, we're going to aquamarine, and we'd lock on aquamarine. And then everything in the craft, including ourselves, would start vibrating at this frequency of aquamarine. There would be a giant resonation going on. We didn't feel anything, and Carr said, you're not going to feel anything, and your brain is going to tell you it happened. You're going to say it's a dream, or it didn't happen, or whatever. So when you get downrange, I want you to follow this list. And he gave us a list. You're going to pick up rocks, you're going to put sand and dirt and grass in your pocket, you're going to do all these little things, and then you'll be back here and we'll talk. Well, that's exactly what happened. And as he said, our brains said, wait a minute, we didn't move. We didn't move. Did we move? We were, because we weren't clear with ourselves, we were in conflict with our brains. We were arguing. We knew we had done this, but our brain was saying, you couldn't have done that. Stupid. Ridiculous. Until we pulled out this grass and these rocks and everything else that we collected. And then we realized, and then part of our mind opened up and remembered, oh yeah, I can remember something.
So you didn't remember that you walked out of this as a location and picked all this up? This was forgotten?
It was totally forgotten when we got back. It was totally forgotten, and we said, well, when are we going to leave? We said, you're back.
How many times did it...
okay, on the ground, there was 2 different time ratios. You were right. Onboard clock that said one time, and their time was another time. It was similar with my guy coming down here.
Did you actually time that? Did you have an onboard clock?
Yeah.
What was the difference?
Well, onboard was around, I'm not sure, but close to 15 minutes, the whole experiment. 15 minutes. And on the ground, it was almost microseconds. It was just 2 seconds. This whole thing transpired.
Wow.
And
what did he picking up the rocks and the grass and all that and doing that?
It's a time warp. There's time warps everywhere. We just experienced one flying down from Las Vegas. We gained an hour. We're in the future right now. Literally speaking, we are. So there are warps in time. And it's only because we don't realize it or utilize it that we don't reap the benefits of understanding what that really means. I mean,
I think it's important to point these matters out because of shifting in perspective, because of where we're at perhaps at the moment where we may be coming from in our understanding. So I'm really curious about this kind of effect so that I can shift my perspective to a different way of looking at these matters.
Well, again, coming back to the original the self-meditation there, it's just stay focused on the now. And forget about the past. Except to know that we've got old tapes that have to be reprogrammed.
I'm sorry,
in the future we'll take care of it.
I have a tendency to become a little philosophical about it as far as don't I am. To get back to the class, you came back, and the steering of this happens by focusing on the color.
No.
How would you know the direction? There's the time difference, and then I think in terms of space, it's going from location to location, and I think in terms of direction. How did this transport take place?
It wasn't a focus. There was no focus necessary. It was so simple you wouldn't believe it. It's just like you and I sitting here now, and I say, let's go to Hawaii. We would be in Hawaii for a week, you and I, having a good time, and back here in the next few seconds. And you would plug out this memory saying, oh, that was just imagination. And you're throwing away. Huh?
What beautiful people.
It's like throwing the baby out of the bathwater. We're throwing the best part of us away and using just the bare crumbs of what we've got left.
And in a way you're saying, for instance, it wasn't that you weren't flying this by mind.
No.
Focus. No. It was through the color that it was flown.
It was, the area was mapped. We had a map of the area. And that was all color-coded, the map, basically. And we, at this particular experiment, wanted to go to aquamarine. And because this area, when we scanned it, radiated best on the aquamarine frequency, 7,000 or whatever cycles.
I've heard of remote viewing, where people are giving these coordinates that someone else associated with a particular locale. And then people would go there mentally and do this. This is sort of how the craft knew, to have a consciousness that knew that aquamarine meant this place, and it would go there.
No, the craft didn't, but our consciousness.
Yes. So it was a matter of your consciousness going.
We were sitting there saying, okay, you're going to aquamarine, and we believed we were going to aquamarine. And sure enough, we went to aquamarine and came back.
So in a sense, there is an interaction of your consciousness with the craft.
Right.
Absolutely. That's one of it.
Energy can't do a thing by itself. It has to have consciousness to move it. And we are the consciousness. And if we don't move it in a direction that's comfortable and happy for us, we're going in the wrong direction. We're going backwards. And that's basically the state of affairs that we've got ourselves into, the world. They've gone into, they painted themselves in a corner, and they're looking for ways out, and they're trying to dig up the old tapes to find their way out. And there is no way out. There's only the new way. And the new way is getting back into self, getting back into self-respect, self-dignity, self-everything. And from that, you can see forever. You can solve any problem. You can sustain yourself in any situation for any amount of time because you're hanging on to something greater than what you're told to do.
So this forever potential, or this opening of possibilities, was that something you experienced in the craft while you were transporting, or how did that work?
I should bring this up. When we were working with the craft, we were in an accelerated state of mind. We were super high off of the excitement involved. My God, look at this, look at this. We were just vibrating as high as we could. And in that state of mind, the real brotherhood was there. We were all closer than any living relative you'd ever want to have. It was a bonding because we were in the same consciousness. We wanted to accomplish the same thing. We wanted to bring this out to people. Here, it's free energy. You don't have to toil anymore for labor. You can do as you please. You want to draw, you want to climb mountains, do it. Because that energy will come back in the forms of teach me how to climb a mountain, teach me how to paint. So you don't have to toil at something you don't want to do. You're free to do what you want to do. And that's what the spaceship, the hovercraft, were designed to do, to take people away from having to toil for a living. That they could, all their energy bills free. You never have to pay another. And this was demonstrated in that house you'll see in that book back there in Arizona and Prescott. We lived there for years. We lit up the mountain. We had color TVs. We had computers and everything. It was all free energy. No noise, no pollution, no maintenance. It's all done by understanding the laws of nature.
So if I see there's so much more to this, you spend a lot more time on this. No, I appreciate it. I'm seeing how, if we could put it in one contemporary term or sentence, what would you call the experience in the craft? Is it a spiritual experience or?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. It was nothing less than spiritual. In fact, when we realized, when we came back down out of this consciousness, and you said, look in your pockets, etc., and we were hitting our hands, this is a body, all right, we had to get refamiliarized with the idea of a body. Now, I don't mean that we were cuckoo or unconscious of everything. We were totally conscious of everything we did. But a body is an idea. It's not a reality. It is an
was it like going into a foreign country and noticing very, very different surroundings, and then yet they're familiar? I've come, I used to live in Germany where I grew up, so I said I was 16, and I've gone back, and I went to my hometown, and I'm very familiar with the streets and everything there, and yet when I came back there was a sense of nostalgia about it, that I was a stranger in a familiar land. Is that an good way to put it?
When we wake up in the morning, we have to get reacquainted of who and what we are. We don't realize it because it happens in microseconds. But we've been off who knows where. But we come back to this reality because it's like a schoolroom. It's a classroom here that we're engaged in.
Now, when I was in Germany at that time, I was still also thinking of the United States, which is my home at this time. Was there something that you took as you became refamiliarized? So for example, when I wake up, I may have some memory of the dream and then it fades. Did you retain something of that experience that you take?
That's why I'm here. I retained a lot of it. I know, I've been there, and I know what the consciousness is. That's why I'm stressing consciousness opposed to nuts and bolts. The nuts and bolts are what we've been doing for years. I've known people building spacecraft all over the country with nuts and bolts, and it doesn't get anywhere until you apply the consciousness.
So, would you say that the consciousness has received the nuts and bolts, or that the nuts and bolts are a part of creating the consciousness? Or does it go simultaneously? Sort of the chicken before the egg question?
Well, when you start developing the consciousness, the nuts and bolts become less and less necessary. They, in fact, cease to exist after a while.
Now, I'm thinking of a term that I've often used: a hungry man cannot think of God. So if you have to toil, so like off to work I go, as I pay off what I owe. So how do you perceive, if you take it to today, and what you want to share, how this shift is going to take place in terms of nuts and bolts and in terms of consciousness? What would you like to see? What would you like to see from people, from us? What would you need to work with us, and how do you envision going from here today?
What we need to get spaceships in the air this year is for you all, we all,
to be who and what we really are, and to act on that and be responsible for that. In other words, taking the old tapes out, if we don't like it, why do it? Take the old tapes out and plug in something that we like and would like to do. And if we just keep doing that, it will happen. I guarantee it. Because that's what the way we did in Apple Valley. We started with just a laboratory and a brainstorming around the table of what we were going to do. But until we rose up in our conscious awareness, until we realized, oh my God, we've got all the power here to do anything. What do we want to do? Then we could see. And it eliminated the nuts and bolts stages. We didn't have to experiment a lot because we could see respect to the principle, in this case magnetism. We kept focusing on what magnetism was.
May I indulge you in this one area? I'm attempting to see how to combine a spiritual awareness with a more pragmatic earthly stance, and I see often that perhaps in terms of myself, when I observe it with others, also perhaps from my own place, that we go to a spiritual center and to meditate, and we share some of that brotherhood and sisterhood that we, in the depths of our heart, hold dear. And then we exit the church, and then I see people get into their cars and we race off, and we get back into the hustle and bustle, and we have to make the bills, and we have to go to work, and we have to do all these things, and that spirit that was there seems to get lost. How do we make a transition to go to that place and remain there? And my thought has been, if people can have more energy available to assert that more brotherly, sisterly focus, then we would have a way to get there. So that's like a seesaw. An elevation in consciousness generates perhaps a more elevated or simplified state of nuts and bolts, and they in turn enable us to focus more in the spiritual sphere, which then in turn elevates us in our technical progress. Is that how do you see it?
In practical terms, you just described what's called a Mobius twist. It has no beginning and end, and it is a never-ending cycle. And that's what we live in as a Mobius twist, or a double helix, like the DNA that are crossed. It is no beginning and no end, and the outside becomes the inside, and the inside becomes the outside continuously. And that's what man in his present technology has forgotten. He's put the spirit of the thing outside and thinking he could do it himself. And if you don't have the spirit of it, if you don't believe in something, it won't work. It will not work. You have to believe in it or it won't work. And so the idea to believe in oneself again, and be responsible for your thoughts. When you're asked, how are you? Tell them the truth. It's hilarious sometimes. It gets into some very good areas, because you'll loosen perhaps some icicles that are there, knowing that you're going to tell them a lie. How are you today? Oh, I'm fine, you liar. I mean, they can see it. But if you tell them, oh, God, I'm not feeling too damn good. What's the matter? What happened to you? And you get into a communication. You get back to being people.
Yeah, I talk about communication versus communion. There's a surface chatter that perhaps doesn't get digested. Like, how's the weather? Versus, how are you feeling? What's really going on? And finding a place to be radically honest about that. In some ways, today, to move in that vein, I came here and I said, I want to build a craft. I'd like to really do that. I want to do one of those things, because I envision I could get rid of my gasoline monster. I won't have to pay for gasoline, etc., etc., etc. I can power my home, and in a somewhat selfish way, that's what I want. And maybe I'm not thinking too far beyond that. On the other hand, I have meditated, and I like to do this. I was saying, I want to get this clear, that the message today is I came here to build a craft, but I should leave here building my consciousness,
or can we?
No,
can
you're
we
building
do
the
both?
craft right now. As we speak, we're all building the craft right now. But we're focusing on one idea. We're doing it. The only reason it hasn't got here before is people lose their focus and crap falls apart. It's that simple. When you leave this room, if you continuously remember yourself and who and what you are and what we're trying to do here, what we are doing, not trying. Trying is another word that we call weasel words. There's if, ands, buts, trying. They don't go anywhere. They go around in circles.
Not try. Do or not do.
Do or not do.
I've had dreams from early on in my childhood where I was flying or transporting in a craft of the type that you see in terms of what many people today call saucers or UFOs. And so I've had that focus for quite a while, and I have a hunch that that's why we're here today and why I find myself in this place. And I'm really looking forward to the continuance of that focus into that moment when I truly find myself on a journey like the one you described with Otis. So I want to thank you very much for what you've shared. And
my pleasure.
At this time, what I'd like to do is we'll have some questions from the audience that they've written down. And before I take those and answer those, I want to ask, and I'll put this on pause for just a moment. Do you want to take a brief, or just a brief break, a 5-minute break, and then we'll get into the questions you've written down, and then a little bit more?
There's some questions on those cards, and then...
Yeah, give me the cards. We'll go over those questions, and then we'll take some from the audience, and I have to have a brief discussion about the time here, too. Sound good? All right, good. We'll be back in class.
Thank you.
Pierre Sinclair is working with what David Hamill, someone perhaps a little like Otis, is doing with magnets and also with developing a spacecraft. So we have this for another time. There's possibly the option maybe for those who want to stay and not go to lunch, that I'll put it on during the lunch break. And so we'll, if it's okay with you, Jim, we'll shelve this for another time for the lunch break. Okay?
Well, Mike and I will stay and see you through the lunch break.
Now, okay, great. Do you have do I have all the question sheets? If not, would you please hand any question sheets that are still out there to me? Briefly, and put your name on it too, if your first name, if you'd like it mentioned on there. I see some of the cards don't have it, so if that's all right, if you remain anonymous, that's all right. But if you want to be recognized for your question, I would want to mention your name. So do I have all the questions? Okay, great. Then
Just one thing before we begin.
Yes.
I'd like to close off what we were doing before. Mike and I have brought one copy of to use copy because he's read it. It's his book, but it's well marked of Shirley MacLaine's Going Within. We'd like to get this in circulation, at least people looking at it, because it's got a lot of information in a very small container. She's done a lot of research for everybody. And I think, Mike, you marked the Meditation 12 up in the right-hand corner. There'll be a little number. And Mike says the number 9. You got a number 9 on there? Look at the book.
Do they have a number 9 on there?
Yeah, number 9.
Do you have number 9?
You got it. It's a good book.
Oh, my. Thank you. What is it?
They have given it to you.
This is now your copy.
does anyone recognize this writing as theirs?
I've already read it.
Does anyone recognize this writing as theirs? Whose? This
Oh, that might be
Yours? I'm having trouble with the word. Did you, what does it say here? I cannot
Travel.
Travel to.
Have you read the book before? No.
Thank you. Okay, got it. So I have all of them here. I remember years ago. Are we ready? Okay, so we'll get started here. Turn this on. All right, so we're back from our break, and we're taking a few questions now from the audience that they wrote down on cards. Ralph, is it not true that most of Tesla's experiments were lost in a fire in New York? If so, how were they recreated, and where can we find them?
Not true. Tesla's technology has never been destroyed, and the original copies that we got back in this country, and they're readily available now, came out of Yugoslavia. They had the original documents from Yugoslavia. And they compiled a big book. You can still buy it. It's about $100, but it has everything that Tesla did in it. There's nothing except for notes. There's some notes back on the table here that never got into the book, but we've got those little diagrams and pencil scribbles or things that didn't get into some of the books that came from Tesla.
Let's see, about 20 years ago from the Tesla Museum, I had a pilot pick up 3 books for me. One is all of his U.S. patents, and the other is his Colorado Springs notebook, and the third is Tribute to Tesla.
Okay.
They're all big books like this and about 3 inches thick.
Thank you. So the brief answer to that question is yes, the information is available. And
we'll never been out of circulation, except in this country.
We'll give out at the end of this talk some information on how to contact us so that those who are interested in finding that information will be able to obtain it. Are the other members of the original OTC group also attempting, like you, to recreate the original project?
Well, Wayne Aho...
Thank you for your answer.
Wayne Aho, is some of you know Wayne. He's very much in the vanguard of the development again of the spaceships. And myself and Bergstresser, a fellow by the name of Bergstresser, we built a craft in New Mexico. They're in the back of the book there, the small craft that we built in Mexico.
Well, Bergstresser?
Oh, I'm sorry, not Bergstresser.
He just passed away.
No, I know he did. Energy Unlimited. He wrote the books. Walter Baumgartner. Walter Baumgartner. We built one in New Mexico. Him and I and the crew. We built another one in New Mexico. It didn't fly, but we built it. And we've been trying to build these all along.
So you're in contact with these people?
I'm in contact with Wayne, and other than Wayne, there's Dennis Colton somewhere, and Dennis Ripolte is someplace. I don't know where they're at. I am in contact with Wayne. And Lee, she was there as well. That's his wife.
Correct. Next question here is, if we can underline, then isn't there enough underline if we choose to believe underline there is? If we can, then isn't there enough if we choose to believe there is?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This meeting we had today has accelerated the entire planet because it's a body of people coming together in serious consciousness, wondering what in the world are we doing, and why aren't we more comfortable with our world? And so the answer is, yeah, we have already started back towards responsibility.
I have sort of an image also, not with a bumblebee, but with a fly, when I was taught about chaos theory. And I was told that if a fly in the Amazon took a right turn instead of a left turn, it could change the weather over here. So while I'm very clear about my minuscule contribution, if I consider the throng of humanity, when I realized that, I thought that my little input could make quite a difference. So I'm sure that we all have.
Actually, it may not be that far off base. It just takes a small amount of energy to change things.
Well, there are reports of the birds flying north now all over
So,
the country.
We've heard that.
the next question here is, did you move to a known physical location in the ship, i.e. to another place or planet?
Another place?
Was that the only time that you moved, or in that movement?
Oh, you mean
that
in the
one
craft,
yeah,
in the
I
spaceship?
believe so.
Did you go to another plane or another planet on the front?
No, we just announced Victorville, Greater Victorville Valley, whatever that is.
Would it be just as simple as marking a color on a map to move to the moon? Or do you get
Well, yeah, you could say that. Yeah, if you're conscious of what you're doing, yes, absolutely, no doubt. But we always have a tendency to leave something out, and then we get discouraged because it doesn't work. And it's because we left that little something out, which is concentration or focus or whatever, that it doesn't come full cycle. Everything in the universe will come full cycle if you let it. The trouble is we start something, and before we allow it to come full cycle, we start something else, and then we start something else. And we never see it. We never see the full cycle, but it's natural law.
Okay, another set of questions here. Why is the 12th meditation so necessary to this project?
Well, why not? Why not? It's a good starting point. It's a premise. It's a foundation, if you will. If we have a consensus that there's something in that idea, we have a consensus, then it's just, we have bonded in a consensus. We have already started. And because the ideas in there are simply saying, please wake up, be who and what you are, basically. And you are what I am what you are, so why not get together and do something comfortable and worthwhile and lasting and so forth.
So it's wherever you are, there you are. It's wherever you are, be there.
Wherever you are, what?
No, it's just a joke. I took this from a movie. Wherever you are, that's where you are. And I'm going, well, perhaps it's wherever you are, be there.
Okay. That's like, what was that saying? I'm lost.
Yeah.
I've gone to look for myself.
Yeah, if I should return before I get back.
Please do it. Ask me to wait. Or the other one was, out of all the things I've lost, I miss my mind the most.
How is it applied technologically, functionally, to the process of the project?
How is it applied?
This 12th meditation.
Oh, how is that applied?
How is that applied technologically, functionally to the process of the project?
Well, let's see if I can use a demonstration here. When I demonstrated this a little while ago, yeah, I wonder how many people could actually see that this is all there is. It's not necessary for big power plants or Hoover dams or anything. And the only way you can see something like this is to tune into something like this within ourselves, to raise our level, our perception of seeing something. We can see just two magnets and an old broomstick. What's that? Or we can see the principle. And the principle is just that simple. We can get everything off the ground with that principle right there. We can have homes levitating 3 inches, 3 miles, to 30,000 miles away from us, and completely self-contained. The bodies that we have now will be vibrating at a higher frequency. hence the 12th meditation. We have to generate our own, get our own motors running to get high enough to experience.
Again.
The only difference between a good idea and a bad idea is how you're looking at it. It's a perception. If you're high enough, if you feel good enough, if you're happy, it's a good idea. If you're not happy, it could be a bad idea. It's just perception.
So the concentration creates a perception that will allow you to see the principles in technology, and thereby allow you to move the technology forward.
That's why I introduced that, because if we can focus on this concept within ourselves, it's not my concept, it's written by an anonymous person. So you can't blame it on anybody, nor can you pin it on anybody.
You could try. Oh, there's that word.
But it's a focus point. It's like when we have children and we want to spank them because they're naughty. If we go to that focus point a moment and realize they're just kids learning here, I've got to find a better way. I don't want to hit my child.
So you take the knot out of the naughty.
Huh?
So you take the knot out of the naughty.
Take the knot out of the naughty. You got it.
How does the human fly or direct the hovercraft? I think we covered it somewhat before, but perhaps.
Okay. We didn't direct it at all. The human, this body you see here didn't do a thing but sit in conference with two other guys, and we looked at this situation, and we just knew we were doing something. That's all there was to it. When we moved in our time frame, we realized we were there. The door opened, we got out, and we walked around and talked to each other. I don't remember all of the details of this, but I remember doing these things. And it was a very real experience. And we got back in the craft, and again, we had to get into this frame of mind. In other words, well, I guess we're going back now. And we were back. It was done by the mind. It wasn't anything we did physically to control the craft. It was, we willed. It was a point that was stressed by Carr. There's a difference between wants and will. If you want something, you can want it forever and you'll never get it, perhaps. But if you will it to happen, it will happen. It will happen. And that's natural law.
And there are comments here, and perhaps you'll comment on the comments. I'll read them briefly. There's a Stan Tenon, if I read that correctly, who speaks of here the geometric metaphors of life. And the person writes here, consciousness unfolds, it's all there is. What would you say to those statements?
Okay. I can agree and disagree that it's all there is, because I agree it's all. It's in the connotation and it's in the way I'm focusing on that word, all there is, or it's all there is. It depends on the connotation that I want to put on it. The energy that I put on that meaning focuses it where I want it focused. So what it means in reference to what we're doing is we are connected to all that there is. And all that there is everything. We don't have to sacrifice one for the other anymore. That's what we've been doing with the system that we've had. Well, you pay us $20 and we'll watch after your cow, and then the cow gets out, and, you know, the government, or blame it on whoever, big power companies, doesn't matter. That's all in the past. Present is that if we focus on what we're doing today, on ourself, on our inner self, there's no limit. There's no limit to what we can accomplish. And we don't have to do it physically. In fact, we don't have to do anything that we're not doing right now. We're enjoying each other's company, I would hope. And that's all we have to ever do, because the rest will start happening by itself if you let it. If you try to do it, it won't work. We tried to build a craft. We tried that too. It has to build itself. It's the same as those pictures of that house in there. My wife and I built a house into the side of a bank, facing north in Prescott, Arizona. They told us, you know, this is a solar state. You have to face south to get the solar, da-da-da-da. But this is what we had, a north-facing slope. So we went intuitively into ourselves. What do we do with this? We got 12 acres here. I don't know what to do. But we refused to, you know, just let the land die and go away. So we started concentrating on what we had, and we built this house that you see in there. It's a round house, underground, facing north. And because of the tilt of the planet, getting back to that, your cold side of your planet is on the north side. So the house was built like a donut. It had a hole in the center of it, and the sun shined through the hole. And when we opened the door on the north side, guess what? The cold air would brush in from the house, from the north, and circulate around our house and keep us comfortably at 69 to 72 degrees all around. It's a natural convection. It's a natural law. No pumps, no noise.